The Sunset Limited, pride of Amtrak's fleet, is America's first coast-to-coast train. This double-decker superliner combines the luxury of the past with high-tech innovation. But it's barreling into the night toward a boat lost on a foggy river. In just 8 minutes, the fate of 47 passengers and crew will be sealed in one of the worst train disasters in American history. Now, with cutting-edge computer technology, we reveal exactly what went wrong. Disasters don't just happen. They're triggered by a chain of critical events. Unravel the fateful decisions in those final seconds from disaster. The United States, Alabama, Mobile. Wednesday, September 22nd, 1993. 2:52 a.m. The Mobile River is one of America's most important inland waterways. Yet in 1 minute, the calm of night will turn to devastation. The story begins 3 days earlier, when the train departs Los Angeles to begin its epic journey across America. In the 3,000 miles to Miami, the train makes 50 stops and over 200 passengers board. The Sunset Limited is no ordinary train. It has 3 engines and 7 double-decker cars. One that seats 72 for dining, and 1 Vista lounge with floor-to-ceiling windows. The comfort and well-being of the passengers is the responsibility of John Turk, the onboard supervisor, who takes pride in his train.
Humongous amounts of steel surrounding you, all of this comfort. We had all of the technology, we had great conductors, great engineers. We even had the new engines, quieter, faster, stronger.
For many passengers, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see some of the great American landscape, from the mighty Mississippi River to the spectacular Gulf Coast beaches. Trudy Justin and her husband Larry are returning to Florida from a vacation in New Mexico.
We took the train, great trip. No maps, no congestion, no having to worry about turning, and just really relaxing. Very comfortable.
For 2 days and 2 nights, the Sunset Limited charges ahead. By Tuesday, September 21st, the train is in Texas, over halfway to its destination. By tonight, it will reach the busy Mobile River in Alabama, where it will cross some of the oldest river bridges in America. At the mouth of the river lies the 2nd largest port in the U.S. 4,000 acres of docks handle more than 19 million tons of cargo a year, supplying the Midwest with coal, steel, and lumber. Today, the towboat Movilla is due to deliver 6 loaded barges to Tuscaloosa, 225 miles north of Mobile. When complete, the flotilla will stretch 490 feet long and 100 feet wide, secured by wire and safety lines. What's more, the Movilla is designed to push the tow of barges out in front. Andrew Stabler is the Movilla's captain. He's been working on the river for 19 years.
Well, everything was normal. We came into town, we got our supplies, got our groceries, got our maintenance done. It was normal day, routine.
2 p.m. While Captain Stabler and the crew are preparing their boat, the Sunset passes through Houston. Ken Ivory has missed his flight and decides to take the train instead.
I've never been on a train before. Very first time, and I thought it would be very exciting to see the country from a different perspective.
5:30 p.m. The Movilla is now ready and sets off from its base to collect its fleet of barges. At the same time, the Sunset Limited is now powering through Louisiana. 10 p.m. The train arrives in New Orleans, where food and water supplies are replenished. The train refuels its 3 engines with 5,800 gallons of diesel. But there's a problem. Engineers discover they need to repair the air conditioners and one of the toilets. The train will be delayed. 11:30 p.m. On the Movilla, Captain Stabler retires to his bunk.
I went off watch. I laid there and watched TV a while. A certain time, around 12, I shut my light off and go to sleep.
Willie Odom takes the helm. Although the pilot is far less experienced, he's the captain's second in command.
I had worked with Willie before, and he done a good job. Good pilot, I think.
11:34 p.m. Finally, 34 minutes behind schedule, the Sunset departs New Orleans.
I went to sleep.
12:55 a.m. The Movilla leaves its last collection point with all 6 barges in formation. The barges are laden with steel slabs, coke, and a heavy iron compound. It's a gigantic load weighing over 1,400 tons. As they head upriver, everything seems set for a peaceful night.
Here's your National Weather Service forecast for Mobile and surrounding areas. For tonight, fog was reported. At Pascagoula, fog was reported.
Fog rolls in frequently on the Mobile and descends in patches. Haze envelops the Movilla, but pilot Willie Odom is used to these conditions. 2:15 a.m. Odom radios to another towboat that he knows is further up the river.
He called in reference to the conditions of the river where we were at, and they were getting worse. It was what we would call in the towing industry a shutout fog.
Jeff Williams is on pilot duty on the Thomas McCabe, over half a mile ahead of the Movilla at the top of 12 Mile Island. Willie Odom is approaching the island, but he can't see it. He decides that visibility is so bad he can't go on. Willie keeps his boat close to the banks and tries desperately to find a solid tree on which to anchor. But in this swampy terrain, there are few trees strong enough for his heavy load. On board the Sunset Limited, virtually all the passengers are asleep in their seats or bunks. The train is gliding through the darkness. Willie Odom has failed to find a place to anchor. He could just shove the barges into the bank, but believing he's near a familiar tree, he keeps going. He is traveling at just 1 or 2 knots, pushing more than 1,400 tons of cargo blindly ahead. 2:45 a.m. Suddenly, there's a sharp jolt. Willie feels the impact of the barges crashing into something, but has no idea what he's hit. However, Captain Stabler isn't worried.
I woke up because I felt a bump. It didn't roll me out of the bed, and it didn't knock anything off the shelves, or just enough to wake me up.
The captain is called to the wheelhouse by one of the deckhands. He assumes the barges have just run into the bank, but when he arrives on deck, he finds the pilot badly shaken.
I get real confused because Willie's confused, and see, I trusted Willie. I don't think he realized what was happening. He was just in shock.
6 minutes later, at 2:51 a.m., the Sunset Limited passes a green light, which signals the all clear. It's just 1.5 miles away. Unaffected by the fog, the train is now accelerating up to 72 miles per hour. Most of the 220 passengers and crew are sleeping soundly, for now. Seconds from disaster will continue in a moment. Amtrak's finest coast-to-coast passenger train is hurtling through the backwaters of Alabama, and it's on a collision course. 2:45 a.m. 5 miles ahead, the towboat Movilla has just slammed into something. The captain of the Movilla is struggling to control 2 barges which have broken loose. The Sunset Limited train is carrying 220 people, and most of them are asleep. The engine crew has no idea what's about to happen. 2:53 a.m. Suddenly, the train crashes at full speed. Passengers are hurled in all directions.
I remember there were 3 huge, loud bangs. And each time, I could feel the equipment buckling and jumping.
It probably wasn't but a few seconds, but it seemed like a lifetime. I had the time to sit there and say, man, this train is derailing.
The 3 lead engines of the train have careered off a bridge. The crew's sleeping car, baggage car, and 2 passenger cars also fly off the track.
When it went airborne, it did like a 360. I thought I was gonna die. I thought all of us was gonna die, for sure.
These first news pictures reveal the severity of the crash.
It was a pretty rough impact. I heard screams, I heard people just yelling, and just all kinds of chaos.
I remember saying, Dad, 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 calling my husband because I could hear him groaning.
The fuel tanks burst into flames on impact. They're nearly full after having been refueled just 4 hours ago and are now leaking thousands of gallons of diesel into the river. The captain of the Movilla, Andrew Stabler, is some 650 feet away. He hears the noise and sees a huge fire ahead.
While I was still trying to figure out what's happening, and we seen the fire, you can see the glow was so foggy, but you still see that glow, and you know it's a fire.
John Turk, the onboard supervisor of the train, is shaken out of bed, but unhurt. He is in the sleeper compartment, one of the 4 cars at the rear of the train, which has stayed on the track. He rises quickly and rushes towards the front of the train to help the passengers.
I could see the flames were kind of in a distance, and my eyes are focusing for what my memory has. Well, where's the next coach? Through that portal, I should have seen a door. Now, not only is there a fire, the train isn't there. Not only is the train isn't there, we're on a bridge, but the rest of the bridge isn't there. This was unbelievable. I stood there for just a moment, just stunned. It was shocking. I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
John Turk immediately calls the emergency services.
Okay, you with the Amtrak train?
Yes, ma'am. I'm the supervisor on board. We're on the Mobile River.
You on the Mobile River?
On the Mobile River. We got cars burning. They're over the bridges. There's people in the water. We're trying to help them, but we need all kinds of help. Yes, ma'am. We need help. Ma'am, I have to go and assist these folks.
2 passenger cars have crashed into the river. One is almost completely submerged in the swamp. The other is sticking out of the mud at an angle, and Trudy Justin is among the many people trapped inside. She is trying not to panic, but her husband Larry is injured.
I was trying to get my husband up off of the floor, and I couldn't see. And the coach is filling up with smoke, heavy, heavy, thick smoke. It was decided by someone that we need to get out, that we're going to explode. And I heard them yell, water's coming in, the water's coming in.
You could hear the gurgling, people drowning, and just chaos.
The train has crashed in a tributary off the main Mobile River called Big Bayou Canot. It's a remote swampy region about 6 miles from Mobile and not usually open to river traffic. There are no roads to the accident site. The police department's 911 operator calls the Coast Guard, but can't give them the exact location of the crash. 3:20 a.m. From their base at Dauphin Island, south of Mobile, the Coast Guard sends out a 3-man crew in an inflatable reconnaissance boat. It's 13 miles from Dauphin Island to Big Bayou Canot, where the train has derailed. Even with good visibility, the journey would take 35 minutes. People are still trapped inside the first passenger car, which is half buried in the swamp and rapidly filling with water. One passenger, Mike Dopide, scrambles frantically for an exit.
I could barely see anything, so mainly I'm feeling my way around. I'm trying to feel for an emergency handle, trying to feel for some kind of an opening or lever I could use to get out. I actually remember stepping on someone, and she, cried out in pain.
The car is being propped up by one of the beams from the bridge, providing a glimmer of hope for the people on the upper deck. There's an emergency exit just beside the beam. Mike Dopide gets out first. A former lifeguard, he stays to help the others.
Mike was hanging onto the post, and when the people come out of the car, he tell us, you're gonna go down in the water, and what I'm gonna do is jerk you back up. It was pitch black dark, and the only light you had was from the fire. You couldn't see nothing. You didn't know where the bank was. So do you take a chance at trying to get to that bank, or you just stay with the wreckage?
Mike Dopide manages to help some 30 people escape from the carriage. Now other dangers could be lurking, alligators and poisonous snakes. However, the burning train itself is the biggest threat.
Water is a loose word. This was not water like the bathtub or anything. This was diesel, very strong with diesel, to the point that afterwards our skin peeled.
You could hear people screaming and just death. It was just death all around.
The crew sleeper carriage has crashed beside the passenger car. It too is on fire. And one of the conductors, Ronald Quaintance, a friend of the onboard supervisor John Turk, is trapped inside. Some of the crew try to rescue him.
Mr. Quaintance was asking them to please get him out. The flames, to please put out the flames. They couldn't get the door open. They couldn't separate the equipment. The flames became too great. They had to abandon him. He said the Lord's Prayer. He said the 23rd Psalm. And if you ever heard his voice once, you didn't have to be there to hear him saying those prayers. You could just imagine it. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not. Our Father who art in heaven. And that voice haunted me for a long time.
On the Movilla, nearly 1,000 feet from the accident site, Captain Stabler has finally managed to round up the loose barges and shove them onto the bank. He now heads back towards the fire to try to help.
We're still amongst a hell of a fire. This is a huge fire. And that little breeze is blowing that smoke right into the wheelhouse, up to the point where I can't see, I can't breathe.
The captain of the Movilla can't get close enough to rescue the people in the water and tells his deckhand to take the skiff, a small aluminum rowing boat, into the swamp. But the skiff can only carry 4 or 5 people at a time. It is unstable and the current is strong. The Movilla eventually rescues 17 people from the water. Trudy Justin, her husband, Mike Dopide, and Ken Ivory are among them. 20 more are picked up by another tug. 4:25 a.m. The Coast Guard finally arrives on the scene to help with the rescue. A relief train takes the remaining survivors on the riverbank back to Mobile. "47 people have died in the crash, 5 of them crew members. It is the worst disaster in Amtrak's history."
I would like to ask that we all bow in a moment of silent prayer.
And this is why they were praying in Washington tonight, the deadliest train wreck in Amtrak history.
The question tonight is what caused an Amtrak passenger train to derail? The cause of the accident is far from being determined.
No one knows what has happened to the bridge across Big Bayou Canot. Why is it now scattered in pieces, buried in the swamp? Why was a towboat and its barges in the vicinity where river traffic is off limits? Was pilot Willie Odom responsible? Or was there a fault with the signals or the track? At this early stage, every possibility must be considered.
I've just moments ago spoken with the laboratory people. They tell me right now they cannot discount the fact that some part of that track might have been sabotaged.
The crash has taken everyone by surprise. The Sunset Limited, Amtrak's glorious coast-to-coast superliner, has been a dream on wheels for thousands of tourists. It has never had a fatal accident until now. It took just 8 minutes. Now we rewind the events of that fateful night and go deep into the investigation to reveal what really happened. Advanced computer simulation will go where no camera can, into the heart of the disaster zone. The National Transportation Safety Board immediately takes over the investigation. Within hours, they arrive on the scene and begin the process of finding out why the crash happened. They analyze the wreckage, searching for clues that will explain the disaster of Sunset Limited Train Number 2. They call on railway engineers, bridge experts, and marine specialists in their search for answers. More than 900 miles away, a man receives a call at 5 a.m. at his home in Virginia. His name is Russ Gober, and he is the leader of the NTSB team. He heads straight to Mobile.
As we came into this place, a beautiful setting, but just a horrible sight. You see a bridge completely missing and cars in the river and equipment just completely destroyed. That is stress.
It's now up to Russ and his team to find the answers.
A company towboat and 6 barges were near the bridge at the time of the accident.
What I'm saying is we are looking at a suspect barge.
It is now well known that the Movilla was in Big Bayou Canot at the time of the accident, but it is still a mystery as to why it was there. The bayou is not a commercial waterway. The night was foggy, but the Movilla is equipped with radar that should have clearly indicated the turnoff. Willie Odom tells investigators he saw the banks on the radar, but not the intersection. 30 minutes before the crash, Odom reaches the north end of 12 Mile Island and veers left instead of continuing upriver. The question is, was he too preoccupied with the fog to check his radar screen? Investigators learned that Willie Odom was not properly trained to read radar. It is not one of the requirements for licensed towboat pilots. 10 minutes before the Sunset Limited crashes, Willie Odom is in Big Bayou Canot. When he finally does check the radar, he sees something he does not recognize.
He called and asked me if there was a tow of any sort that might be moored or anything between me and him. And I told him no, not that I knew of.
The Movilla is not on the main river, and what lies ahead is not another tow and barges. Willie Odom has made a fatal error. He's on the wrong part of the river. 8 minutes to disaster. Willie thrusts his engines into reverse, but he's too late. Suddenly, there's a bump as the barges run into something. But to the captain of the Movilla, this gentle bump doesn't feel like a bridge collapsing. So what did the Movilla hit? We'll continue with more seconds from disaster after this. Amtrak Sunset Limited crashes off the bridge at Big Bayou Canot, Alabama. 47 people perish in one of the worst train wrecks in U.S. history. Now, using advanced graphics based on the NTSB's official report, we go deep into the investigation to unravel the deadly chain of events. To prevent future accidents, investigators need to find out exactly why the bridge collapsed. They know a towboat was nearby, but did it hit the bridge? They send in their bridge expert, Ron Weber, who returns to the scene of the disaster.
It was much greater than any other accident I've been on. That was 47 dead, and it's a vast amount of people.
Ron will rely on forensics to tell the story. He hones in on the South Pier, where the bridge became detached, looking for any signs of damage.
Well, I was looking for telltale marks. We call them witness marks. Any physical evidence. Well, here you have missing concrete. So it was obvious that this chipped off. There's also some chipping of the concrete closer to the water.
The damage that Ron discovers is consistent with an impact from a heavily laden barge. It's a promising lead. He reports to Russ Gober, who's in charge of the investigation. But Russ needs more evidence than chipped concrete. He wants to inspect the Movilla's barges to see if they too have any damage or telltale marks.
The safety board does not take anything on the surface. We want to scientifically look at it. So we took scrapings from the barge, the paint, and we took scrapings from the piers, and we had our lab analyze it, and then we sent it to the Federal Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab and had them to also analyze it.
Then a breakthrough. A few days later, the results come back from the FBI Materials Lab in Washington. The forensic experts line up the marks on the concrete pier with the front left-hand side barge.
The structure of the particles matched up the best that you could match something.
It's the first scientific proof that the Movilla hit the bridge. But a heavy steel bridge on solid concrete piers should hold up. The impact from the barge was slight.
That portion of the bridge was still in proper position and had not moved. So we knew that the barge did not knock the bridge down.
The investigating team needs to dig deeper. If the barge didn't knock the bridge down, what did? They remove much of the debris from the river and examine it for clues. It is photographed and then sent to New York for forensic examination. After 5 days, they recover part of the central through girder of the bridge. This span, known as the girder section, lay across the bayou supported by 3 concrete piers. It is 140 feet long and made of steel. But the impact has now crushed it like a piece of aluminum. They inspect and photograph every inch of the girder. Then the investigators spot something.
We looked at the bottom flange of the girder, which is pretty strong, has good stiffness, and along this 140-foot girder there were 2 places where it was indented, obviously from a pretty good force.
The investigators find recent scratch marks and indentations on the underside of the girder. If the barge has only hit the concrete pier, what caused the marks underneath the bridge? Was there a second impact?
This was really something that our marine and bridge engineers were astounded with and kind of puzzled at first indications. They were not sure until we got the bridge out of the water what happened.
Investigators must now take a second look at the critical moment, 8 minutes before the accident, when the Movilla hit the bridge. They know that the barge didn't destroy the bridge, but have they missed a vital clue? The investigators return to inspect the Movilla's barges, paying particular attention to the push knees at the front, the extra bumpers designed to help one barge push another. Then another surprise.
In this tow, we found other barges that had scrape marks on the push knees. I think one was 22 inches wide and one was 21 inches wide.
But they find these scrape marks on the center barge, not the left-hand barge that has hit the concrete pier. Russ Gober goes back to the evidence. He finds that the dents in the girder match the scrape marks on the center barge. The pieces of the jigsaw are beginning to fall into place. Investigators can now prove a second impact. Milliseconds after the left barge slammed into the pier, the center barge collided with the middle section of the bridge, the through girder, hitting it like a 1-2 punch. But this still doesn't solve the puzzle of why the bridge collapsed. The girder section should still hold firm. So why did it end up in a swamp? Stay tuned. More seconds from disaster in a moment. The Sunset Limited train has careered off a bridge, and 47 people have perished. Investigators now know that barges from the towboat Movilla rammed the bridge, but they are certain that the impact was not enough to destroy it. Bridge expert Ron Weber needs to find more clues and decides to dig deeper into the bridge's curious 3-part construction. Before long, Ron makes a remarkable discovery. The 84-year-old plans for the bridge reveal that it was originally designed as a swing bridge. Swing bridges are fairly common in the area, although this function has never been used at Big Bayou Canot, just over 1.5 miles away. Bridge Sarah is a working swing bridge. The center section, or through girder, is designed to swing open to allow boats to pass through. Ron wants to see if this bridge will offer any clues.
We're looking at a similar swing bridge, and you can see where the train tracks are almost halfway up. And you see the mechanism on the bottom of the bridge.
The gearing mechanism enables the bridge to rotate. Back at Big Bayou Canot Bridge, the investigators then revealed that not only was the swing mechanism never operational, it wasn't even completed.
The Bayou Canot Bridge wasn't being used, so it didn't have the wheels on it. It didn't have any of the gears there. If they wanted to make it a swing bridge, they could have done it very easily.
The investigators must now answer a crucial question. Could this swing mechanism have affected the bridge's ability to withstand impact? The bridge at Big Bayou Canot is designed to handle extremely heavy loads. Every day, around 20 freight trains cross the bridge, exerting massive downward pressure. But Ron finds out that the bridge's designers have made an unfortunate error. They didn't allow for lateral impacts. The central girder is just resting on one of the piers and is not properly bolted down.
Well, I was surprised, but they did not look at the possibility of a force from a barge or a ship hitting it.
This design oversight, undetected for 84 years, will result in tragic consequences. To see precisely how, we must look again at the moment of impact, 8 minutes before the crash, when the Movilla's barges hit the bridge.
When the barge came along, it moved the whole girder over this way and fell down this pedestal. And you can see here yet the missing concrete, which it broke off.
As the girder section fell off its pedestal, it left telltale marks on the concrete.
There were some red lead paint marks from the bridge. These old bridges were painted with red lead, and some other scratches.
Ron now knows what happened to the bridge. It didn't collapse simply because it was hit by the Movilla's barges. By incorporating Ron's findings into our enhanced computer graphics, we can now reveal exactly what went wrong. First, the left-hand barge hits the concrete pier. Then the center barge rams into the girder section of the bridge. Because it's not secured at the south pier, it swings out of position 38 inches and into the path of the train. However, the Sunset Limited train is a couple miles from the bridge. There is still time. Investigators know that the track is fitted with an automatic alarm system. If the rail snaps, the signal switched from green to red to alert oncoming trains. So why didn't the system signal danger? Examining the rail tracks at the scene is almost impossible due to the extent of damage caused by the impact. But they find one important clue about the condition of the track just before the derailment. 2 minutes before the crash, the train rushes past the last signal before the bridge, which has already been hit by the barge. But the signal recorder shows that the signal stays green, meaning there's no break in the track ahead.
If the rail had broken, the last signal prior to the point of derailment would have been a restricting signal.
A restricting signal requires a train to immediately reduce its speed to 15 miles per hour. But the Sunset didn't slow down. There was no red signal, and the track wasn't broken. Why? Modern rail tracks use continuous welded rail, designed for its strength and flexibility. It's laid in 1/4 mile segments, which gives it great ability to absorb the energy of an impact and resist fracture.
Continuous welded rail is very flexible. If it's not bolted down, it can move and look like a piece of spaghetti if it isn't attached. When the barges struck the bridge, it just shoved it over for 38 inches.
This is the final fatal link. If the track had broken, the sensors would have been triggered. But the flexibility of the rail means that the track is just bent out of shape. Even a deviation of 38 inches leaves the signal wiring intact. The Sunset Limited is now just over 1.5 miles from the bridge. The massive steel girder lies in its path. And there is no way to stop the train from its collision course. The train is carrying 220 people. When the black box event recorder is recovered, it reveals that at the moment of impact, the train was traveling at 72 miles per hour and was not slowing down. The front engine of the train smashed into the girder, forcing it and the bridge down into the swamp. 2 days after the accident, the lead engine is hoisted from the swamp. The damage to the engine proves the investigators' conclusions, that it hit the girder before flying off the bridge. On impact, the engine is catapulted into the air. It slams into the mud on the opposite bank. The first passenger car follows within seconds.
I remember it being airborne, and I was holding on, bracing myself. And then the car did a 360. It just made a complete turnaround.
The girder of an old swing bridge has moved out of alignment, resulting in tragedy for the 47 lives lost and their families. But Ron Weber discovers that one simple measure might have prevented the catastrophe. More answers when Seconds from Disaster continues. Investigators have finally unraveled the chain of events that propelled Amtrak Sunset Limited into a swamp near Mobile, Alabama. Ron Weber believes that a simple and inexpensive modification to the bridge could have prevented the disaster. He suggests that shear blocks could have easily been fitted between the pedestals of the pier, acting as a doorstop and preventing the girder from moving. The barge's impact would have had no effect.
The weak link here was where it attached to the pier, and as we know, it was only held there by friction on one end. And that just isn't enough. And for minimal cost, it could have been fixed.
This is not the first time a train derailed because of a displaced track. After an accident in Utah in 1979, the Federal Railroad Administration did a feasibility study on installing a mechanism specific to bridge displacement. It would trigger the signals even if the track was just bent out of place. The FRA concluded that the cost of such a national system outweighed the benefit. Since 1982, 26 derailments, including Mobile, have occurred due to displaced bridges. There is no nationwide safety system in place, which would prevent this from happening again. So could it happen again?
We hope that nothing like this would happen again. But if there is a unprotected bridge and barges moving in the area, it could happen again.
One of the positive outcomes following the NTSB report is that licensed towboat pilots must now be qualified to use radar. But for passenger Trudy Justin, the nightmare lives on.
This last summer, when the fires out in California were so horrible and they were burning up about half the world out there, I was walking into a video store and I turn around and every one of these TVs, there's no sound, and the whole thing was showing the California fires. It was like the tongue of the fires was just leaping right out of that television. I had a flashback because that was the realest that I had ever seen since the night 10 years ago. I ran literally with my heart pounding. I mean, that was what we lived through.
John Turk, the onboard services supervisor, returned to work just 4 months after the accident.
I couldn't sleep in the crew car for a long time. I couldn't sleep nowhere near the front of the train. Even if my assigned room was in the crew car, I couldn't go in there at all. That voice was waiting for me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not. Our Father who art in heaven.
On that September night in 1993, Willie Odom's fateful wrong turn into the bayou was the first tragic event of a deadly sequence. However, pilot Jeff Williams knows only too well how easily this can happen.
In 1990, I was pilot on a smaller boat, and we had left Mobile, almost same time, same river conditions. Whenever I came up into the wheelhouse, I looked at the radar and trying to figure out exactly where we were. There was a train came across that big Bayou Canot Bridge, and it was a very frightening thing. I know it's possible that it can happen.
The barge's impact with the bridge was the second critical event. The bridge girder, not properly bolted down, swung out of line. Then, the third critical event. The track bent, but did not break. The warning signal did not go off. Captain Stabler believes these events were more like fiction than real life.
Everything does it just like a movie. I mean, just like a script. Somebody just shot a movie, that's a movie. It's either with you or against you. It was against us.
Just 11 days later, the Big Bayou Canot Bridge was rebuilt using fixed girders without a swing mechanism. The Sunset Limited has resumed its luxury service, taking thousands on their dream vacations, so far without major incident.